You're 26, standing in line at a sleek electronics store, holding a glossy box you don't own. 3 years of $135 a month for a bundled flagship phone, matching smartwatch and premium tablet package. You do the math. $4,860 paid, zero trade-in value, and next week your contract ends, meaning you'll hand the devices back and upgrade to the next cycle just to start over. Same loop. Newer screen, longer contract, perpetual tech debt. You sit there for a minute on a bench outside the mall, looking at the digital signature screen on your current device. That's the night you decided to break the upgrade cycle, buy a reliable refurbished baseline model outright, and keep it until it completely stopped working. What that minor behavioral shift actually cost you socially, and the massive leverage it quietly built financially, took 10 years to see fully. The device nobody noticed. You find a certified pre-owned, 2-generation-old black smartphone on a verified electronics outlet, unlocked, 128 gigabytes of storage, with a tiny, imperceptible scuff near the charging port that the seller swears doesn't impact performance. You drive 40 minutes to look at it. You bring a friend who knows hardware diagnostics. Your friend runs a system check, tests the battery health, checks the camera lenses, and inspects the charging port. He says it's clean. You pay $210 cash. No carrier financing, no hidden multi-year service contracts. Number 36-month installment plan on a highly perishable digital asset. You initialize the device, transfer your data, and walk home with a phone that is entirely yours from the very first text. The next Monday, you're in the office break room and your coworker Marcus pulls a brand new, ultra-premium folding device out of his pocket, deep emerald green. He's paying $75 a month just for the hardware. Bundled into an unthrottled $95 premium data plan he only uses to stream podcasts during his commute. He mentions the $170 combined fee the way people mention health insurance. Just a fixed cost of existing in a modern city. A few weeks later, your friend Sarah texts a photo of her new desktop setup. She just financed a premium monitor and audio system for $65 a month over 2 years. She's thrilled. The interface looks beautiful. You don't say anything because here's what nobody says out loud. Consumer electronics financing and subscription creep have become the most normalized financial leaks in daily life. This year, the average young professional carries multiple active retail installment plans across phones, tablets, smartwatches, and laptops. People are borrowing against their future earnings to possess items that depreciate by 40% within 12 months of unboxing. And almost all of them will do it again before the hardware is even halfway paid off. Before the device is paid down, the battery health degrades, a newer model debuts, and they roll the remaining balance into a fresh, extended contract. The microdebt carries forward, invisible, buried inside a single, bundled carrier or store bill. The average tech user who follows this endless loop pays thousands of dollars extra in structural premium costs over a decade compared to someone who buys refurbished and holds. Most of them have no idea. You knew some of this the night you sat on the mall bench. Not all of it, not the exact numbers, but enough to feel the shape of the trap. So you bought the refurb phone and then you did one other thing. You opened a brokerage account and configured an automatic transfer. $150 a month, first of the month, before any discretionary spending occurred. You didn't trade volatile crypto assets or chase speculative tech stocks. You simply funneled the cash into a steady, yield-generating index fund tracking the S&P 500 and told it to grow every month without asking you. The $150 wasn't arbitrary. It represented the exact delta between a premium device lease plus an inflated data plan, and your paid-off hardware paired with a streamlined, prepaid carrier plan costing just $20 a month. The phone was entirely free to operate outside of the minimal data fee. The capital that used to disappear into consumer tech debt was systematically redirected. Same recurring budget line, entirely different destination. That first transfer was $150. No notification arrived to tell you it was a good idea. No one at work asked about it. Marcus was talking about the hands-free camera gestures on his folding screen. Sarah was posting photos of her workspace aesthetics. and you were moving $150 into an account that nobody could see. That's the whole setup. Nothing dramatic about it. You bought a functional phone with cash, minimized your recurring service fees, and automated the difference. 3 decisions made once that you mostly didn't have to think about again. What you didn't understand yet, what takes years to actually feel, is what happens when that kind of discipline runs into the long middle. Because the math is the easy part. The easy part is the spreadsheet. The hard part is every corporate meeting, every social gathering, every year that passes while everyone around you is unboxing sequential upgrades and you're still pulling out the same plain, scuffed device. That's where the real cost of the decision shows up, and it shows up for a long time. The quiet that compounds. Year 1 is fine. The refurbished phone operates efficiently. You manage the storage, clear the cache, and maintain a basic protective case. The $150 moves on the first of every month without you touching it. Life feels manageable in a way it didn't before. Quieter around the edges, like a noise you didn't notice until it stopped. In year 2, the protective oleophobic coating on the screen wears down, leaving a persistent smudge pattern right in the center of the display. You notice it every morning when you tap the screen. It looks a little dull under direct sunlight. You don't replace the phone. You wipe it on your sleeve and keep using it. In year 3, Marcus cycles his device again, not because it failed, but because his 36-month lease expired. He traded it in early, rolled the remaining balance into a new premium contract tier, and locked in a fresh $78 monthly hardware fee. He mentions the low-light camera features once casually during a break. You nod. You don't do the math out loud, but you do it in your head. He's been paying a continuous, uninterrupted tech tax for 6 straight years. Different devices, same structural leak, never a gap between them. In year 4, the device battery health drops to 76%. The phone occasionally stutters on cold afternoons or drops from 15% to 0 without warning. Your phone struggles to hold a charge past 4 p.m. if you're navigating via GPS. A local independent repair shop replaces the internal battery for $50 total. The technician tells you the motherboard is perfectly fine. The performance stabilizes, the battery capacity returns to normal, and the minor degradation becomes background noise. You stop thinking about it. Year 5, Sarah updates her workspace equipment because the original monitors no longer support the latest graphics OS updates. She signs a new extended installment agreement. When you look it up later quietly, you find that a significant percentage of retail electronic sales are now driven entirely by point-of-sale microloans and, by now, pay-later mechanics. The industry's answer to hardware that costs too much is simply to spread the pain out further until the monthly number feels manageable, even when the total doesn't. Year 6, you attend an industry conference. You place your older phone on the table during a networking dinner. A peer glances at the thick bezels and makes a light, passing remark about its age. You make a brief, self-deprecating joke and regret it immediately. You apologized for a paid-off, functional tool with $13,000 sitting behind it in a compounding account no one in that room could see. You think about that on the flight home. Year 7, you need to coordinate a multi-day family event. You utilize the phone for dozens of logistics calls, shared cloud spreadsheets, and navigation routes. The device executes every single task flawlessly. It occurs to you somewhere during that chaotic week that you have never once required this piece of hardware to be a status symbol. You've only ever needed it to compute and communicate, and it has fulfilled its core engineering purpose completely. Meanwhile, the capital base expands under the mechanics of compounding yields. By year 7, the account balance hovers around $16,000. You're still executing the baseline $150 monthly transfers, but the principle itself is now compounding on a scale large enough to generate distinct monthly returns. The organic yield begins to outpace your physical contributions during certain quarters. You check the balance once every few months, you don't touch it. This is the part no one talks about when they talk about financial discipline. They talk about the ultimate net worth targets. They don't talk about the 7 years of ignoring targeted advertising, of bypassing annual upgrade cycles, of watching people around you cycle through trendy tech like it's fast fashion, of doing a thing quietly that produces no external signal that it's working. There's no moment in year 4 where someone pulls you aside and says you're doing the right thing. There's no notification. The account just grows and the hardware continues to process commands, and the years just pass. And then something happens that you didn't plan for. Not a celebration, not a milestone, something that arrives without warning and demands everything you've built. And in one night, you understand what the long middle was actually for. That's when the breaking point comes, and everything you've quietly accumulated suddenly has a name. It's a late Tuesday evening in November. You receive an urgent diagnostic notice regarding a structural issue in your living space. A severe plumbing and electrical failure behind the kitchen drywall that requires an immediate, non-negotiable restoration to prevent systemic building damage. The emergency contractor provides a baseline estimate on the spot. $6,500 to cut the walls, replace the main line, and dry out the internal framework. It is a mandatory repair that cannot be deferred. You don't panic. You don't scramble to review credit card limits or calculate how to split the invoice across multiple high-interest retail loans. You tell the coordinator to initiate the cleanup crew immediately. You don't debate the financial impact for a single second. As the crew begins setup, you sit at your kitchen table and open your financial application on your older, scuffed phone. You log into the isolated reserve account. The brokerage balance stands at $28,400. You close the app. You look at the automated history. 10 years of consistent, uninterrupted microtransfers sitting quietly in the background. You haven't touched it once. You've data cleared it from your daily thoughts. But it's there. And in this specific moment, sitting amidst the mess, it means something you couldn't have fully conceptualized at age 26. It means that regardless of how complex the remediation becomes over the next 3 weeks, you are completely insulated from a debt spiral. You will not carry a high-interest credit card balance into the next calendar year, and you will not have to make desperate lifestyle compromises to absorb the shock. The money doesn't repair the drywall, and it doesn't reduce the physical mess in your home, but it provides an absolute, unshakable floor under your feet. And right now, that's everything. The work is finalized the following week. You pay the contractor via a direct bank transfer from the reserve, watching the balance drop without looking away or feeling a sense of ruin. On your evening commute, operating the same reliable phone, you evaluate what that capital actually represented. Not the numerical digit itself, but the decade of compounded freedom behind it. The scuffed casing, the battery swap, the ignored tech keynotes, and the steady $150 transfers that ran while no one noticed and no one cheered. It was working the whole time. It was working. And then you think about Marcus, about where he is right now, what his liquid reserve looks like, what's behind him if an unexpected structural shock hits his household without warning. You already know the answer, and that's where the contrast becomes impossible to ignore, because his side of the story looks completely different from yours. The cost nobody tallies. Marcus isn't careless. He shows up to work early, excels at his position, and satisfies his obligations on time. He doesn't gamble. He doesn't have an obvious spending problem in the way people usually mean when they say that. He just did exactly what the mainstream consumer system told him to do, in the exact order it prescribed, and a decade later, he's standing in an incredibly fragile financial position. His combined device footprint is currently $190 a month across his phone contract, a financed premium media tablet, and a smart audio setup. He has 22 months left on the latest contract. Before that, it was the folding phone. Before that, a flagship model he leased fresh out of college. 10 years, for distinct device generations, and never a single billing cycle without an active consumer electronics liability. It has just always been there. What's also always been there, invisible underneath the payments, is the opportunity cost. Because his monthly cash flow is heavily fragmented across multiple small installment loans, he carries minimal baseline liquidity. When his vehicle required a standard $1,200 transmission service earlier in the year, He lacked the immediate cash reserves to cover it alongside his recurring installments and rent. The balance went onto a retail credit card at a 24% variable rate. By paying only the structured minimums, that single maintenance event takes 2 years to clear, compounding the total cost significantly. This is how financial momentum stalls on a microscale. The minor consumer payments crowd out basic cash savings. The lack of liquid savings ensures the next standard life disruption requires high-interest revolving credit. The credit card interest then consumes more monthly cash flow, leaving even less room to build a reserve. No single transaction causes bankruptcy. It is simply a continuous, low-grade structural drag year after year, leaving the consumer with zero insulation against volatility. With a standard median income, these fragmented tech and lifestyle installments easily consume 8% to 10% of a young professional's gross take-home pay. When you add premium data bundles, insurance add-ons, and premature upgrades, the structural tech leak expands silently, leaving minimal capital for long-term positioning. Your tech footprint costs a tiny fraction of that drag. Your prepaid data plan and periodic maintenance consume less than 1% of your annual cash flow. The massive structural delta between your path and his, automated consistently over a 10-year timeline, is what sits securely in your portfolio. What a decade of a boring tech decision actually built. Your phone crosses a significant age threshold on a quiet Tuesday in November. The core operating system can no longer accept critical security patches, and the primary processor struggles with modern, heavy web architectures. The hardware has reached its legitimate engineering limit. There is no emotional frustration. It is simply a depreciated asset that has fulfilled its utility cycle. You log onto a verified online marketplace and search for a clean, 2-year-old certified pre-owned device. The market price for a highly capable, pristine model is $400. You write the digital check from your primary checking account, bypassing any carrier financing, credit checks, or multi-year terms. The transaction takes 90 seconds. You execute the purchase without extracting a single dollar from your investment accounts, without altering your monthly trajectory, and without asking a lender to rescue you. That is what the original decision built, not merely a numerical balance, but the structural capacity to make significant capital choices from a position of absolute leverage, rather than forced dependency. Marcus will finance his next device package, not because he's irresponsible, but because his fragmented cash flow leaves him with no alternative liquidity. The retail ecosystem functions precisely as intended, maintaining a continuous cycle of renewal and predictable debt to keep the consumer dependent indefinitely. You are entirely out of that loop. And the remarkable thing, the reality that strikes you when you look down at your phone, is that none of this required an elite inheritance or complex financial maneuvering. It came from a single, disciplined decision made at 26 to opt out of a normalized consumer loop, choose utility over status, and let time do the rest. The thing that quietly changed: you're still using functional, unglamorous technology. The casing has minor wear, and it doesn't turn heads when you drop it on a desk. Nothing about the hardware has changed, but something about your worldview has. You stopped needing your equipment to say something about your wealth somewhere around year 4 or 5. You can't point to the exact calendar date. It just quietly stopped matching what coworkers thought, what brand Marcus purchased, or what upgrade cycle Sarah signed into. You made your singular calculation, you held your line, and your asset column expanded. That's the entire equation. There is no hidden secret you missed, and no faster shortcut that someone else discovered.